Welcome to the Exponential Australia Church Leaders Podcast.
Well, hello there and welcome to the Exponential Australia Church Leaders Podcast. We are so glad that again you've been able to join us today as we've been talking with, interviewing, hearing from just such a wide range of amazing leaders in our nation and also abroad, particularly around multiplication, church planting and the opportunities for the Aussie Church in this season. And today we are so honoured to be joined by Joel and Julia Rebel, who are the Oceania regional leaders of Convoy of Hope. They are leaders that many Aussies would know. They have served in God's church in Australia for a great many years. And guys, we are just so overjoyed that you'd be able to be with us today.
Great.
Thanks
Great
for having us.
It's awesome. Hey, maybe for those who don't necessarily know much about who you guys are and some of your ministry over the last couple of decades, I wonder if you guys, maybe starting with Joel, would give us a bit of a sketch about where you guys have been and what has brought you to where you guys are today.
Yeah, great. Okay. We've been married, Joel, Julia, been married nearly 30 years. And we pretty much jumped into vocational church ministry at the end of our first year of marriage. I did, and then Jules followed. She was studying.
A couple of years later.
So we started kind of in youth ministry, rose up through different levels there, and then were senior leaders. We handed that church over, and that was a C3 church, a Christian City church. We handed that over and went to what everyone knows now as Hillsong, but it was called Sydney Christian Life Centre back then.
Wow.
And again, went back and started as youth pastors and rose through the ranks there. Really broad leadership experiences, got to do lots of different areas, many different departments in church life. I think that's a real blessing for us. We got to experience many different aspects from kids and youth and campus and everything that involves a campus, and then all the way through to obviously leading that in Australia, but then conferences and seminars and events and quite a large budget, but having all different variant sizes. We left there and then pioneered a church and then handed that over as well. And then the last few years we've been a Convoy of Hope and involved there in a humanitarian organisation. So it's been quite diverse, but always in the church space, in the faith space, either pastoring a church or helping churches in the community, helping churches in the community, all those types of things. It's really our passion.
And I would just concur to that. Like, pretty much. Yeah,
the last 30 years of our life.
The last 30 years in 2 minutes. That was brilliant.
Wow, great effort, Joel. I wonder, kind of sitting back after 30 years of ministry and just reflecting upon the wide range of experiences that you guys have had, starting off in a coastal town, being part of one of Australia's more, the world's more influential churches, planting a church, and we're going to get to Convoy of Hope in just a moment. But I guess what would be some of those reflective kind of things you would say after 30 years of ministry of your experiences in the Aussie church, like the things that have brought you great joy and also the Lord has burdened your heart for, what would be some of those things that would come to mind if you were to kind of almost summarize those 30 years?
Yeah, I think we love the church. We love the church and its diversity. I don't think we've ever been attracted to one style of church. I just think we've loved his church and we've loved the various expressions of his church across the world. And I would say one of the things that I feel about the church these days is very hopeful. I feel very hopeful about the church because it's his church. It's not our church. It's not your church. We are the church, but it's his church. Yeah. It's the Lord's church. And so if he's got anything to do with it, he's got great days ahead for his church. I think, the church has gone through a lot of transition in the last number of years, especially because of the pandemic. The pandemic allowed us as the church to take a look at a few things that maybe we're ready to take a little bit of a side step or maybe an outstep, and it gave us a chance to rethink a lot of things. And I think that Jesus is right in the middle of transitioning his church into something quite stunning across the earth. And I think if we've got eyes to see and a heart to understand and ears to hear what he's saying right now, will end up being that church that he sees in his heart. And so I'm really hopeful about the church.
Yeah. We've had the opportunity, Charlie, to travel the world and see churches in different countries and different cultures, different styles, different sizes. And I think the one thing is true in all those places is that people are just beautiful. They respond to the call. The Lord calls us to serve others, and to see that in all those different contexts is quite stunning. And that's why we feel hopeful about Australia. We feel that the Lord is calling and stirring hearts right across the land, especially, not exclusively, but especially amongst young adults. We feel like there's a real call there for people to step up and step out into leading churches and faith communities. But it's not exclusively to them. I feel like the Lord's calling lots of people, and it's time. It's time to let people go and let people start things. And we need more churches everywhere across the land.
Hey, that's so exciting. I look forward to maybe asking you some more questions about that towards the end of our interview together, because that's something that's obviously very close to the heart of Exponential. But I guess the prompting that I just had in my spirit, I can only call it the Holy Spirit, as kind of you guys were sharing, was particularly as you have navigated so many different seasons of church life, those that would have been challenging, those that would have been joyful, those that would have been expected, those that would have been very unexpected. The kind of word that came to me was particularly around transitions, and how you two have been able to navigate transitions well, from being in a larger setting to leading what you're leading now, to planting a church. What have been some of the things that you guys have really, I guess, clung to when it's come to transitions in ministry, and how you've been able to lead yourself and lead other people well?
It's funny, because the clung to is kind of the key. Like, not don't cling to anything, right?
Or if you're going to cling to anything, just cling to Jesus and be very purposeful about following his lead. I think transitions is a great word, but I actually think it's a painful word, because if you think about labour and going through transition in labour, it's a very, very, and I've gone through that only twice, but that was enough. In the natural sense, birthing babies, and the transition is actually really painful. And although, I guess people on the outside of our inner circle would maybe see really amazing transitions, there's a side to a transition that has that wonderful outcome in the end, but the process is quite painful. And I think that probably the most painful part of the process is when you're transitioning into different seasons, away from people that you love and that you've sown your life into, and you did that willingly, and you do it all over again. And when life takes you in a new direction, or if the Holy Spirit leads you into a new direction, it's that sense of you don't have the same closeness. So you can be close with them, you can love them still, but maybe you're not spending the same amount of time with those people that you used to. And letting go of relationships as you're moving into something else is the most painful part of transition, because the people that we sowed our life into, we did that with absolute love and devotion. And so the letting go was quite hard, but that's a part of transition, is letting go.
Yeah, it is. And there's a lot of talk about strong leadership, about being a strong leader builds a strong church and all those types of things. The strongest leaders amongst us are the ones who can serve well and who have the strength of character to be able to, when in a transition, make it about the other people. So the reason transitions hurt the people who are leading the transition is, if you are a strong leader, you will lead strongly in the area of serving others. And the strength is, I will hold the frustration, or I will hold the hurt, or I will hold, whatever the negative feelings are, you hold that because you're trying to serve others. You want others to have the best experience possible. And it's like parenting with kids. Our kids have grown up and moved out. They've transitioned out of home. And it probably hurts us more than it hurts them, because you're doing everything you can to make them a success. And so it costs you more emotionally, it costs you more financially, it costs you more in energy. And I think the same is true when it comes to church leadership transitions. It costs the it should cost us more, because ours is the responsibility to lead. And strong leadership is the strength to lead in those circumstances where you serve people for their benefit. It's what God does for us. It's what we should do for others.
Wow. I love that, guys, and just some very sage wisdom in there about what you guys have experienced and gone through. And I guess, obviously, the heart behind Exponential in Australia is multiplication, people breaking new ground, having a go, planting churches. You guys, after your season at Hillsong, did jump into planting a church in Sydney, Sutherland, shire. And it would be remiss of me not to go, hey, guys, like, tell us about that experience. You know, it's some of the more exhilarating times in any ministering person's life to plant something new. I wonder if you guys would reflect back upon that season for you guys.
We really felt strongly that the Lord took us in that direction to plant a church. And it was interesting because when he asked us to plant the church, very early on into that decision to plant the church, and before we actually did it, he spoke to us. And you know, when the Lord speaks to you at first, it's not 100% clear, but there was certainties about it. Things like he said to us, in 18 months' time, I'm going to bring a couple along and I want you to give them the church, like this type of terminology. And I'm thinking, why would we plant a church and 18 months later you're going to bring someone along that we're going to give it to? But see, he's got this big picture in mind. It was an incredible experience planning that church, and it grew. It grew really quick, which we weren't expecting it to, or we weren't even necessarily hoping it would. I think we were because a lot of the church plants we were involved in over our 20 years at Hillsong were very fast growing church plants, and so we were actually thinking, let's do this kind of slow. A bit more
methodical, slow it down. But
a lot of people they came really quickly, and that's wonderful. And you never turn people away. I mean, it's the church. You have open arms when people come to church. But I think what happened in that church plant for us, and the Lord probably knew this, there were certain things that we wanted to do differently than what we had in the last few decades. And because of the speed of the growth, I call it, we went back into the rut of building the way that we had in the past, which we didn't want to do. So, you know, you go into some of the, just the technicalities of building in a rapidly growing congregation. And we wanted to, like Joel said, do it in a more methodical and a paced way that took people on the journey. And, you know, you're trying to build a culture within a kingdom culture within a church. And I call it a mishmash of people, or the licorice all sorts. Like, you've got all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds and thinking processes and the way that they want to do church. They're thinking, we're going to do it a certain way. And when you bring that many people together really quickly, there's a lot of, I mean, for some church planners, that's the dream to happen like that. For us, we were hoping for a little bit differently. And but anyway, we ended up handing that on to another couple. The Lord did bring along another couple, and the church has gone on, and which is really exciting. So I think the Lord just brought us in that season to be the pioneers, you know, really break ground, be pioneers, and then hand it over to another couple that would shepherd.
It's great. It was a great experience. It was enjoyable, to be honest.
That's so great, guys.
We're in a church planning meeting somewhere in the middle of that season, and someone got up and they were talking about how hard it is to plant churches, and we understand the sentiment of that. Like, we've done church planning for years, you know, 20-something different churches. But we were sitting there thinking, no, this has actually been really enjoyable. Wow. It was good.
I think too, when people say church planning's hard, I get the picture they had an expectation of what they would have liked it to have happened like. The unrolling of this church, they had a preferred way of it happening. But I think if you just give it to the Lord and go for the ride and don't have any like expectations, it's actually really enjoyable.
We actually didn't have any expectations for the first time in many years.
Wow.
didn't matter what was happening next Sunday and how many were going to be there. So it was refreshing for us.
That's so good.
4 people, that's great. We weren't worried about that.
I think if we were ever to do that again, we put it out there when we were planning this church, and so people knew what we were doing and people heard about what we were doing. I think we'd do it more stealth.
Yeah.
Don't tell anyone. We wouldn't tell anyone, and we would just let it grow really slow and naturally.
Right. Let it pop up somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh, where did that come from? Like a few years after that church plant, that's kind of the way we think, maybe there was a little bit of, we put it out there too soon. Maybe we should have just not put it out there and just sort of about it. So I don't know. I do not know.
Well,
I love that. Well, one of the things that I have enjoyed about spending time with both of you guys, and it's particularly been your heart towards the church in Australia. And for those who are trying to serve their community, for those who are, planting and leading churches in certain ways. But one of the things that I've greatly enjoyed about just hearing about your tone towards the church is particularly those who sometimes aren't doing it tough, who maybe are trying to lead God's church and maybe they're not seeing some of the fruit that you guys have shared and talked about. I just kind of feel this as a bit of a profound moment to allow you guys to encourage people who might be in that situation. Yeah. And for those who maybe aren't seeing things going the way that they may have hoped, how would you want to encourage a leader who might be listening today, hearing some of your story?
I would say in the trying aspect of ministry, be careful what you're trying. Be careful what you're trying to do. The scripture, I can only find one scripture in the Bible that talks about striving, and it's in Hebrews 4, and it says, make every effort, strive to rest. So if you're going to strive at anything, one of the things, especially in a country like Australia, it'd be different in different countries, but in Australia, in a Western democracy like ours, it's pretty fast paced. Even in the country, it's dog eat dog. It's crazy the way life is these days. And I think it's probably smarter to fight for rest and fight for a cadence. And so whatever you're doing, church leader, whatever you're doing right now in Australia or around the world, enjoy what the Lord has given you. Yeah. And don't be trying to get what you don't have. Don't be trying to get the number that you don't have. Thank the Lord for who you do have. If it's 7 or 8, if it's 23 people, 17 people, just thank God for them and just serve them, love them. Let's all go on a journey of discipleship together, becoming like Jesus, raise people up, let them empower people to take those next steps and give them opportunity to serve if they want to. The whole thing about empowerment is if someone doesn't want to, empower them not to. Like empowerment is, it's your choice, Charlie. What do you want to do? And so I would just say, love where you are and love those people and stop trying to become what you're not or become what you see or become something else. Just be you and let others be them. And I often wonder, like the mayor, I was just out in central Queensland a couple of weeks ago, and I was in a town, a region that had 350 people amongst 3 different towns. And I wondered, the mayor of that town, I wonder if that mayor is up losing sleep at night because the town's not growing. I wonder if there's an expectation from the Prime Minister because the population hasn't increased. In many of those towns, it's decreasing. You never get to do what is divine and what is beautiful unless you just get content with what you've got. Like either jump out and go do something else or just love what you've got. And what you've got is beautiful. It's amazing. So enjoy it, be content, love God, love people, love life, get on with it.
Wow, absolutely.
And everything doesn't have to be done yesterday. I think, we lived in a culture that built towards this, that everything had to be done yesterday.
Yeah.
And so you were never on top of everything or anything. Like there was always so much more to do. Like you could never go home at night and feel like you could fully rest. I just think those days have got to be over. I think, we have this thing, this saying, it doesn't have to be done yesterday.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we say that with Convoy of Hope team. We say, everything doesn't have to be done yesterday. And if we don't have the resources to do it, then we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
So, and that's the same in church life.
My friend always used to say to me, be careful that you don't start climbing Mount Everest. You're never, ever going to get there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a profound word, guys. Thank you for just kind of reflecting back on all that you guys have been able to steward and learn in the last number of decades. I want to kind of bring us to today now, where you guys are serving in that role as the kind of regional leaders of Convoy of Hope. And to some that may have seemed like a strange shift from where you've been in ministry, but of course, for those who don't know what Convoy of Hope is necessarily about, I wonder if this is just a great opportunity to speak to your heart for that, and how you've been able to see the church really be on the front foot when it comes to caring for those parts of the world that are most in need, and actually be God's hands and feet in those spaces.
Yeah, thanks. It may feel like it's very different for people who don't know about it, but we spent the last 10 years probably at Hillsong looking after so many different campuses, and a large part of our responsibility was also helping other churches and serving other churches. So in many ways, we haven't really shifted away from what we've been doing and what we're passionate about, which is helping local churches transform their communities. Convoy of Hope is a beautiful opportunity to do that right across the body of Christ in every different denomination. It's not linked to any one particular denomination, so we can serve all. And I think there's a great sense of, because there's no ownership there, there's a great sense of hospitality towards Convoy of Hope globally. It's a global organisation, a global humanitarian organisation. It's been going for about 28 years.
So we're really new to the page in Australia.
Yeah, like we're newbies in this space, and the Australian region has, the Oceania region started just in the last couple of years. But globally, like, we've been serving 193 people in Convoy of Hope. There's
193,000. You said 193 people.
193 million.
Oh, right. You said 193.
Did I? 193 million people over those 28 years.
1,000 is a million. It's not 193.
193 million people. There's about 550 disasters that we've responded to. We're right now in the Ukraine, in Poland. There's been, I think, 3.5 million people that have 3.5 million meals that have gone out to people that are fleeing through Convoy. So it's a beautiful organisation, and we get to work with churches. We get to some of the churches we're getting to hang out with in the cities and in the towns, and just coming alongside them and encouraging them to think about the way they do ministry and the way they reach their community. And I guess one of the things we're passionate about is making sure that your church is not a Sunday only service experience. It's an everyday service experience. So Sunday is a big day. It's an important day, but it's where we collect and gather after everything the Lord's done all the other days, right? Every other day of the week. So just helping churches to reframe that and to empower people in those spheres so that they can serve their community. And we're seeing that churches are reaching their neighbourhoods, and there's some transformation taking place.
I think one of our catch cries is bending the heart of the church towards the poor and the vulnerable and the suffering. And the fact that when we made the transition from Hillsong, one of the things that we really felt like the Lord laid upon our heart was to serve the poor and the marginalised and the suffering. And we've been a part of running wonderful church services, great conferences for the body of Christ. But for us personally, it was like this gap that if we died at that point, we were missing something really important that we should have done, which was to serve the poor. And the fact that we get to serve churches and help them get a heart to serve the poor is and give them opportunities to do that. I think our job's done when any church in a local community, they are that involved in their community, not just their church community, but their actual community, that they don't need us, then our job's done. We move on to another community. Yeah. And, I guess, through disasters, we get to work through local churches to serve those who are victims of a disaster, and then the ongoing work of that. And then we also get to work with churches to do programmatic work in countries all around the world to the most poor, vulnerable and suffering. So it's just, I don't know, it's a dream come true for us to be able to serve the poor. And if in our lifetime we get to make just a little bit of a difference for the one family, the one individual, the one community, then we've done our job.
And can we just say a great big thank you to church leaders all over the place who have supported us at Convoy of Hope for some of the disasters, the floods and the fires down the south coast of New South Wales, the massive flood up northern New South Wales and northern rivers, but even things over in Tonga and Vanuatu and those that are given towards the Ukraine disaster. It's making a difference. So thank you. You know, we always say that the local church is our exit strategy. That we get in, we serve through the local church, and then once that's all happening without us, we're out, because it's the local church that needs to be the hero of the town, not Convoy of Hope.
That's so good, guys. And you were saying just before we hit record on our conversation today that, you know, as we were talking about some of the flooding that occurred, you know, in the northern parts of New South Wales, you guys are still there alongside churches that are seeking to help their community, and that kind of devastation that happens there's a lot of aftermath to that. Yeah, totally. There's some local churches that have been driving up from the Central Coast, from Hope You See, and others around the region, and we're rebuilding homes. But again, we're doing it through local churches in the Lismore Northern Rivers area, because we want to be able to step back and leave it with them, and we'll get on to other areas that are in great need. That's incredible. Jules, I've got a question particularly for you, and you were saying that Joel could equally talk about this, but I'd love to hear your heart behind this. As you guys share around some of the initiatives that you're a part of as part of Convoy of Hope, you've also recently launched the Convoy Women's Collective, and the empowerment of women and girls, I know, is something very close to your heart and very close to the heart of God. And you know, I think the church has got much to make amends for in those spaces as well. I wonder if you'd kind of speak just about particularly that initiative. I know you've also launched a podcast as well. Where can people find that, and just kind of share some of your heart for that?
Yeah, I do have a heart. We both have a heart, actually, to see women empowered. And the truth is, women globally suffer inequality. And it's a devastating thought that in 2022, that there is such inequality across the globe. I mean, to get into that is a whole nother conversation, why that happens. But Convoy Women exists to gather like-hearted women and men, but particularly women. But there are men on the journey too, which is really exciting. They want to gather like-hearted women who want to raise awareness and become advocates for the poor, the marginalised and the vulnerable women that suffer this inequality globally. And we do, I mean, women suffer inequality in our own nation of Australia. And there's a whole lot of statistics that are, you know, that are attached to that are really heart-wrenching and devastating, that this is our nation of Australia and there is such deep inequality. And so, you know, one of the things that we're seeking to do is just to gather these girls together in Australia to begin with, and just to place a great amount of value and encouragement upon them. And at the same time, it's to stir their hearts to become advocates and bring awareness for the most poor and vulnerable women around the world. Right now, we're in 16 countries that we're doing programmatic work. So everything from micro enterprise to girls empowerment programs, like genital mutilation and cutting is a real issue in many countries. And so Convoy of Hope, as an organisation, we're in those communities helping to bring education into that area so that won't be a problem. Like, again, 2022, we're talking about issues that seem quite barbaric to us in the Western culture, but they're still happening in other nations. And most frightening, those same things are happening in our own nation, because we're a very multicultural society. And so it's bringing education and awareness to things like that. But really, it's if we can help, for instance, a mum who's on her own, get a job or to start her own business, that she would be able to look after her family, then we keep the family together. The family doesn't become disbanded. And if we can keep families together, we keep communities together, and we keep women and girls moving forward. And that's our heart. So Convoy Women, we've got a lot of work to do, because half the world is women, and a great percentage, over 80% of those women, are living in poverty in situations. And so to bring awareness to that, I think is really important. Yeah. And there's great women gathering. I'm really blown away.
So the podcast, you can find it anywhere where podcasts are available, right?
Yeah.
Apple Podcasts.
Yeah. So it's called She Belongs Here. The She Belongs Here podcast is all about giving voice to women in all spheres and seasons. So I'm in awe of the kinds of women that I come across, and I feel like it's a tragedy when I come across them and I get to know them and you don't get to know them. And so my heart through the She Belongs Here is I'm just interviewing women and giving them an opportunity to share their heart or the fabulous things that they're doing across all the spheres of society and in all different seasons. And already the feedback's been incredible, because it's just women like, the average woman, and we're getting to hear from her and how fabulous she is. Women are fabulous, and that's what the She Belongs Here podcast is all about.
I love that, Julia. Thank you so much for sharing your heart for that. And I really would want to just direct any of our listeners to go and give that a listen. And I believe that's an integral part to the Aussie Church flourishing as well. One final question that I want to throw towards you guys. We could talk for much longer, and I would love to glean more and more of your amazing experiences. But particularly as you guys have shared, I guess, some of Australia's largest stages and platforms when it comes to the Christian world, and in some of the work that you're now doing, I know one of your heart's cries as we've been, conversing offline has actually also been to smaller expressions of the Aussie Church and what we would now term as micro churches in Australia. Having experienced just kind of the full gamut, the full breadth of the church in that way, by way of size. And of course, I think for us at Exponential, it's about multiplication. It's about opportunities to reach people that haven't been reached with the good news of Jesus, whatever way that looks. But for you guys, as you're in a new season of particularly exploring what that looks like for you, I wonder if you would share some of your experiences and learnings, particularly around the micro church and opportunities for the church in Australia to look smaller, but to do more together.
Yeah, I think Joel can share a little bit more about that, but I think what we're passionate about is, micro churches, but we're passionate about mega churches. We're passionate about the medium-sized churches. I think we're just passionate about whatever God's into. And we think if God's into it, then we're into it. And I think it's not about a certain size, whether it's large or small. It's about what's God putting his hand on and backing that and championing that. And I think one of those things that we're seeing God do is micro churches. And I think, in many circles and probably in conferences that we've been to over the years, attended and been a part of leading, it maybe gave the impression that the mega church was what we're all after. And I just don't think that that's God's heart. I think God's into whatever is seeing people come close to Jesus and become more like Jesus. And so, we're seeing micro churches be part of that gamut of church expression.
I think over the years, the church growth movement has had some great positives in the sense that it has caused some vision casting and a bit of restructuring and some systems and implementing those things for growth. If there's a downside to the church growth side of things, it has created probably an unrealistic expectation and pressure upon pastors to have to be beyond where they are. What we need to do is value everyone where they are. If it's no matter what the size is, the average size church in Australia is not 5,000. It's not even 1,000. It's not even 500. The average size in Australia is still under 200. And we've got thousands and thousands and thousands of churches that size, and we've got less number of churches that are, in the mega. And so we just need to be a champion of all sizes, like Jules said. And I think it's time to stop talking about numbers for a while, stop talking about where you need to be. And these, strategic operating plans need to be more about how do we structure for who we have in order to give the best of care to everyone who the Lord has given us, instead of trying to get to some place that, to be honest, for most churches in Australia is unattainable. For 10 years, people have been trying to become what they're not, and they're still not there. And it just creates more depression. I think one of the greatest things we could do is take that pressure off people and say, you're awesome. That's great. Just go for it. And let's just start more of those. And some of those may grow to be larger expressions. Some may not, but we've already got like 85 to 90% of the Australian church are all under 200. So let's just have thousands more of those. And then maybe some of those will get larger and whatever. It shouldn't be about the size. It should be about people reaching people for Jesus. And I think if we can just explode that and create environments and that's what we want to do. We want to create an environment where people can feel accepted and championed and encouraged. And we want to help them start churches. We want to help those people, no matter what the size, just want to be their greatest cheerleader and not be about size. We're helping people right now. We're helping churches get started, and I wouldn't even say we're leading people. I'd say we're mentoring people who are leading faith communities. So and we hardly talk about the size. It's all about health, and it'll grow if it's going to be healthy.
We've got friends who have started what maybe people would refer to as a micro church. Started in their lounge room, and just a couple of people started to gather. Too many people gathered for the lounge room. And so now they've spread out and they're in 4 different homes. And then
they come together
once a month for a celebration. That's one expression. We've got other friends that that they've got church that they were doing multi-campus, and they've now released campuses to become their own churches, and they're much smaller, but they're taking on the colour and the diversity and the wonder of the people that make up that community. So I think, there's just so many wonderful people out there, and God's stirring their hearts, and we would hate to see them limited by what they thought church should be. And I think micro church is a real doable place to start.
Yeah, it's a great place to start.
And some people, that's where they're going to finish, because that's what the Lord's requiring of them. And I think all of it, in its beauty and its diversity, is stunning.
And
a beautiful representative of Jesus, I was going to say.
Yeah. There's a great phrase that Dale Stevenson says, anyone, anywhere, anytime. And I think that's what microchurch does. It makes it more achievable, more attainable, more repeatable, you can multiply it easier, and you don't have to give up your day job. And I think there's just too many expectations in the other model that it just creates a struggle for too many people. And so if you want to do something, let's chat.
So good. Joel and Julia, I don't think our listeners could be any more encouraged by some of the things that you've shared today. I feel myself joyful, jubilant. Thank you so much for, I guess, the beauty and the encouragement that you bring to the Aussie Church. And particularly as we cheer you on behalf of Exponential Australia with all that you're doing with Convoy of Hope, coming alongside local churches. It's been an absolute joy and a privilege to have you on our podcast today.
It's been great. Thanks so much for having us, Charlie.
Appreciate you.
Thanks for listening. For more great resources, please head to our website at exponential.org.au.